Coming back to that 58 Bassman, most of the work is done now. Got a new power cable in here with the ground longer than the hot and neutral, and the ground's going to chassis right there. The neutral is tied to one primary at one lug of the unused polarity switch. The ground is going to the the hot is going to the interconnector of the fused power switch to the primary. And I showed half of the standby switch last time. It's all wired up now. Got the taped off filament center tap wire there. I have not installed the new hum balance resistors for the heater supply yet. I will. All the pots have been cleaned, all the jacks have been cleaned, everything reinstalled, everything rewired with the yellow cloth covered wire for the most part. I've got a blue one going to the negative feedback and a blue one going from the bias stuff. I forgot to show you the bias thing. I'll show you that. And then a red one going to the standby. You know, all pretty much as Lupe did it, though here on the tone stack wiring, I did do the tightly twisted wires that you'd find on the later AB763 and similar amps. Here's the new standoff with a diode for the bias supply mounted to it. So the bias tap goes here, the diode is over here, and then going to here. Now, the old selenium rectifiers that this diode replaces, they had a different voltage drop than a 1 in 4007, and there are people who will go in there and add a bunch of resistors and try to get the same voltage drop that way. I don't find it necessary because I'm installing a trim pot here, so I'm making up the difference and giving actual bias adjustment ability with this trim pot in series, rather than just trying to do a fixed drop of the same voltage drop as the old selenium. You can see here I've rewired all the sockets. Got the 3 watt 470 ohms the way I always do. I did add grid stoppers, which this circuit originally lacked, but it's very nice, especially in today's world with cell phones and Wi-Fi and such, to have that a little bit of suppression of noise, but they're mounted here, not making the board be carved up in an entirely different way as it was when it came in. All the heater wires have been replaced, done exactly the same way they were a long time ago. Just these new ones are clean and have not been covered in many generations of bugs reproducing and doing all kinds of buggy things inside the amp. The old wires were really in bad shape. You can see the speaker connections have all been done properly with this U-shaped bit of 18 gauge bus wire. Here's the yellow wire going to here, which is for the negative feedback. And the secondaries of the output transformer are coming through here, going to here. All the rubber grommets in the amp have been replaced because they were all degraded, as I mentioned before. Everything on the board has been redone, as I showed in the live stream the other day. And I showed a good bit of this in the previous video on this amp. One difference I made compared to how this originally was wired, originally the grids on the right side of each triode, the one going to pin 2, would have been run to the right here and coming very close to and crossing the heater wire going to pin 9. So I've got them routed approaching the grid from the left, so they cross the tube center and stay as far from pin 9 as possible. Need to move that one a bit more so that there's not any area where they're really close and parallel, and they, just a way of reducing heater noise in the grid of those triodes. It's not a huge thing if you get an old amp with an old layout, but it's better to do it this way. And since it's just a matter of changing the lead dress a little bit, I thought it was well worth doing. I do that on almost every Marshall that comes in, and I've shown that in other videos, and the difference is very, very apparent. The next thing to do will be to replace the filter caps, but before I do that, the next thing is to know the worst case unloaded max B+, because the original had 600 volt filter caps, and I don't want to put 500 volt caps in here if it's going to routinely exceed 500, even if for brief moments. So I'm going to find out. I'm going to put in 2 series 20 microfarad 500 volt caps. It gives me 1,000 volts handling, and I can measure that. So I'm going to install this temporarily, put in the rectifier tube, power this up, and see what the B+ is. In the absolute worst case, right now the wall voltage is 123, so it's a pretty good setup for this test. Let me do a few solder joints, put the rectifier in, and we'll see what we see. So I've got everything set up. I've got the caps installed here in series from the standby switch to ground. I've got the clips on the meter. Let's power it on in standby. The light comes on, and I'm just going to give this tube a little time to warm up. This is mostly just for the test, just in case anything else is wrong or if there's any lightning show from this tube, which I've not really tested. It's the old Sovtech 5AR4 that came in. Seems to be okay. Let's take it out of standby. Unload it. That means that a 500 volt cap, at least for the first node, is really not going to be very happy. Now, that's with the wall voltage at 124 right now. Let's power this off, and I'm going to hook this up to my Variac and give it the 110 to 114 it would have had originally. All right, same test with the Variac turned to 110 DC. Let's see what the B plus goes to now. It's coming up as the rectifier begins to flow. So 485, the 500 volt caps would be fine unloaded if the wall voltage was still 110, really 486. But since it's 530 with modern wall voltage, it was 123, it's 125 coming out of the wall right now. And that's what you have to deal with in a lot of cities. And so you really want to have a bit more voltage capability than you expect. So a 500 volt cap will not do it. So when I do the filter caps, I'm going to have to do a series configuration. And I'll show that next. All right, here's the old doghouse cover. You can see here where there used to be 4 soldered joints. This is where the negative leads of the 4 original caps came out. Each one was 20 microfarads, 600 volts, and the negative leads were just soldered here, and the other end just had little hooks that the wires were attached to. And then there was an adhesive strip which pushed the caps up against the chassis. Now, the only 600 volt axial caps still on the market are made by Sprague, the Atom series. They're $29 each. They're out of stock almost everywhere, and they're terrible quality caps. So bear that in mind before you automatically type, ooh, he made it into a computer, etc., etc. It's all hogwash. What I've done here is put in 3 terminal strips soldered to the shell of the doghouse, just the way the old negative leads were soldered. And these little bitty caps, people think, in the guitar world will say, oh, that's something from a computer, blah, blah, blah. These are Nishikon. These are extraordinarily high quality caps, rated for 105 degrees Celsius. They're rated for about 12,000 hours each. They have extremely low ESR, extremely high tolerance, and I'm running them in 200 microfarads in series to make a 700 volt 50 microfarad stage, and then a 700 volt 23.5. Is that 47 divided by 2? Yeah, 23.5 microfarad stage, and then a 500 volt 22 microfarad stage. And I have not done the final wires. I've done the junction wires for the series. So this is one series pair. This is the other series pair. I'm going to have the reservoir negative go to the chassis over by the power transformer. And I'm going to have the screen and phase inverter negative join the chassis where the preamp filter node that's already in the amp is. And this will be a quieter, more reliable operation than this amp has ever had before. These are much better quality caps than what was available in 1958. So I've got to wire all this up and finish the wiring for this, and it'll all go through. I put in a grommet instead of the old little clamp. They had a tiny little cable clamp, which barely would fit the 4 wires that used to be in there. I'm going to have 5 wires coming out of this. So this gives me a little bit extra space, but it still won't have any friction where the wires might contact that metal. And when this is all put together in the amp, it will look totally stock, totally 1958 from the outside. It'll just be very 2024 in terms of a high quality solution on the inside. So I'll finish wiring this up in the next video. You'll get to hear it. Thanks for watching.